control himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him. So dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine had been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must hurry, you must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt, and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here.' Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him." A couple things came to my mind as I read this passage. One was that the very next text in the lectionary is Psalm 133. And the first line, so I'm scrolling through the lectionary on my phone, the very next verse that I see is Psalm 133:1. "How very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity." I feel like somebody at Lectionary HQ was trying to cook the outcome of this interpretation a little bit. To me, I was like, is this a joke? Is the lectionary people, are they trolling us? It's good, kindred living together in unity. This family that is ripped apart has tried to murder each other. Joseph's messed with them to the nth degree. How is this supposed to be connected to Psalm 133? And then I thought about this song that we were going to do that was new, this Goodness of God song. And I was like, there's an interpretation of this where we go, it's like a musical. And like Joseph comes out and he reveals himself and he's like, all this terrible stuff happened to me, but it's okay. And then the lights go down and the piano starts and Joseph sings the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. Right? That's one way of reading this. Joseph is having this moment of reconciliation and forgiveness. And it's okay. You threw me in a well and tried to kill me. And then I was in prison. And then I tried to make you think I was going to kill your father's youngest son, but it's all good, and we're all together, and it's all unity and love and family. As you can tell, I already don't think the details of the story hold up to that kind of interpretation here. And so then I remembered, actually, and I saw yesterday as we were moving into our house and boxes of books were being unpacked, and our house librarian, Luke, was filing them on the shelves. I saw him put this book on the shelves, which is the Jesus Storybook Bible, which is a kid's Bible that I used to read to the kids when they were younger. And I remembered this page in it where it's at the very beginning, and it talks about how to read the Bible. What kind of things are in the Bible? How does the Bible communicate with us? And so some people think the Bible is a book of rules. It tells you all the things you should and shouldn't do. And they say, the Bible isn't mainly about you and what you should and shouldn't be doing, right? It's about God and what God has done. But then there's another page with a very noticeable Technicolor Dreamcoat character on it. And it says, other people think the Bible is a book of heroes, showing you people you should copy. The Bible does have some heroes in it, but as you'll soon find out, most of the people in the Bible aren't heroes at all. They make some big mistakes, sometimes on purpose. They get afraid and run away. At times, they are downright mean. And I take it that Joseph was chosen for a reason to appear as the central figure on this page about the Bible appearing to maybe be a book of heroes and moral exemplars that we're supposed to copy. But on closer inspection, the heroes don't always hold up. So all that led me to say, I got to figure out what's going on here, and making a bad decision to tell Franklin I would figure it out in 48 hours and share the results with all of you. So let's review. Joseph's saying, it's all good. You did this stuff, but don't even sweat it. God intended it for good. God was using it, and now I'm ruling over the whole land of Egypt. Well, first of all, he's overselling the claim because he's not really ruling over the whole land of Egypt. Pharaoh's ruling over the whole land of Egypt. And in the story, every time Joseph wants to proclaim something, he kind of has to go to Pharaoh and get Pharaoh's permission, and he's always negotiating Pharaoh. So already we can tell Joseph is selling it a little bit strong with this, like, God was great, and now I'm in charge, and I'm ruling the whole land of Egypt. It's not quite right. But also, he's had some pretty terrible experiences, right? His brothers were jealous of him because he was his father's favorite son, and he was kind of loud about it, if we're being honest. He's not the nicest, youngest son in the book. And so they got sick of it, hearing about how he was the greatest and they were the weakest, and he was having all these dreams about how they were going to worship him and bow down to him and respect him. And they were like, this guy's got to get got, right? He's got to go. And so they were going to murder him, and then they decided, no, we'll let him off. We'll just throw him in a well. So they threw him in a well, and then they saw some Midianite traders passing by. They thought, oh, even better, we'll take him out of the well. So now plan C. They're on plan C of how to do terrible things to their youngest brother. That's how committed they are. And they sell him to the traders who take him to Egypt, and he's sold into enslavement in Pharaoh's house. He rises up in Pharaoh's house eventually, is recognized. He's made the steward of Potiphar's house, who's like Pharaoh's like executive assistant, right? He's like Pharaoh's management guy. And then he's accused of unwanted advances to Potiphar's wife. He didn't do it, but he's framed. He winds up in jail. He's sitting in prison. He thinks he's going to get out, but then he gets forgotten. Then he sits in prison a long time more. And then finally there's a remembrance that, oh, this guy is there. Turns out he's pretty good at interpreting dreams. Pharaoh's got some confusing ones. Finally, they get Joseph out of prison. He interprets Pharaoh's dreams accurately, and this grants him favor with Pharaoh, and he winds up being put in charge of preparing for a famine that Joseph predicts is coming and that nobody else knows is coming. And this is his dream interpretation ability. Okay, that's a lot. If my brothers did that to me, I would not be saying, hey, it's okay, God meant it for good and we're all cool now, right? And if we're being honest, Joseph didn't do that. Joseph was incredibly mean and vengeful to his brothers for the whole time they showed up. They show up, they're starving, they're fearing for their lives, they're ready to sell everything they've got just to get some grain from Egypt so they don't die. And Joseph says, well, one, he doesn't reveal who he is. Two, he doesn't say, oh, brothers, it's okay, God put me here to provide for you. He conceals his identity, he gives them the grain, frames them for stealing it, knows that their youngest brother is the most valuable son for their father, goes right after him intentionally, forces them to bring him back to Egypt with them on a second trip, frames that youngest brother like he's being incredibly vindictive. All of a sudden in 45 we want to be forgiving. Joseph's ready to forgive. But he's gotten his 2 cents worth of vengeance right up until this point. I also think there's some inconsistencies here with what Joseph is doing in this act of forgiveness. So he says in the text, right, he says, God put me here so that we could provide for everybody during the famine, so that we could save the people of Israel, so that you and your children and families won't starve. This was a kind of act of deliverance where Joseph was put here for this reason. When you read further on in the book of Genesis, what Joseph is actually doing, though, is he's using his advanced knowledge of a coming famine to prop up the Egyptian empire. So he says, Pharaoh, we know this famine is coming. Let's build these huge storehouses, fill them with grain, and then when the famine gets here, we'll have a lot of grain. Now, the USAID model here would be, and then we'll give the grain to people who need it, right? When you get into the book of Genesis later on, that's not what happens. In chapter 47, they are selling this grain to starving people. And they sell it, it says first they sell it for cash until everybody in the region has no cash left. So they just vacuum it up into Pharaoh's bank accounts in exchange for you get to live because we give you some grain so you can eat. When everybody's out of cash, they switch to livestock. And they come to Joseph, and Joseph takes everybody's animals and gives them to Pharaoh, makes Pharaoh's flocks great, and gives them grain. This is blackmail, intense leverage. This is not a fair and equal transaction. This is certainly not humanitarianism. The cash is all gone. The livestock is all gone. Nobody has anything, and the famine keeps going, and they're still starving. So they come back again, and Joseph says, okay, give me all your land, and then give me yourselves. And the people, at the end of the famine, in exchange for food to survive, they are selling their land to Pharaoh, and they are going into debt slavery, becoming slaves and servants of Pharaoh. How does this wind up? We know what happens to the Israelites in Egypt at the beginning of the book of Exodus. They're pressed into servitude, right? They become slaves. What we don't always get is that Joseph is the one that came up with that idea. Not for Israel, but for everyone in the land of Egypt. So it's not a humanitarian mission. Joseph is a very complex character. And I think the question is, what do we make of that? As far as I can tell, what we make of that is that this story is not about Joseph. And it's certainly not a moral exemplar story about here's a hero we should be like. If anything, the way I found myself reading this story is kind of an in spite of Joseph story. Joseph's not the protagonist. It's not the Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's not a major motion picture. He's kind of a huge part of the problem. He kind of juices the Egyptian empire right at this critical moment, and it goes on to then become Egypt, which is synonymous with oppression, enslavement, violence, right? For the rest of Israel's life. Egypt is the bad guy, and Joseph is the one who inadvertently sets those dominoes falling over. So the way I can see to read this text and to read this book of Genesis and to read this entire thing called the Bible is that it's actually a story about God. Because it's what God is doing in spite of all these great heroes, right, that we've been reading through, in spite of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the stealing of people's inheritance from 2 weeks ago and the stealing of blessings and maybe trying to sacrifice a child, and lots of different things that are pretty, iffy. And yet, even in the midst of all of that, in the full grittiness of human existence with all of its brokenness, God is at work. We live in the midst of all the grittiness and brokenness of human existence. I have been through my share of things that did not make me feel like I was living my best life in the last 8 years. We have friends who are incarcerated, who are lonely, who are in tough situations. We worry about where we're going to live, what's going to happen to our families, what's happening with the people we love. I don't think the moral of the story is that we should be like Joseph and that we should be, God is so good, and no matter what, all the bad stuff that happens, and no matter that TJ stabbed me in the back last week, and it's fine, because God's doing it. I don't think we're supposed to copy Joseph, necessarily. I think we're supposed to know that no matter what is happening, God is present with it. And I think this is paradigmatically seen in Jesus. Jesus is not, everything's great, God's in control, God is in control, we believe that his people. That was like my mom's song when I was growing up. Jesus doesn't talk like that. Right up until the night before he's arrested and crucified, or the night he's arrested, right before he's crucified, Jesus is like, let's not do this. I would not like this to happen, right? God, if you can, if there's some other way, can we do that? I think that is a profound piece of what it means to talk about hope, if you're going to do it in the way of Jesus. It's not optimism. It's not everything works out in the end. It's not everything happens for a reason. Every time somebody tries to give me a rosy picture of what's going to happen to me or my family or our church or our country or whatever, it's like, just remember that like Jesus got crucified. Like that's how that story ended. So if you're looking for like short-term imminent wins, the way of Jesus is maybe not the way for you. But if you're looking for hope, which in the story of Jesus comes not through the absence of suffering and death, but through resurrection from death, that takes that death with full seriousness, that doesn't downplay it, that doesn't talk it away, explain it away, say it's not really that bad, or, people are in a better place now, or, our friend Gordon who's incarcerated, it's going to be a good growing experience. We don't need to say any of that. The word for it is not something I can say in church, but you know what I mean. We can deal with how broken things are and with how broken we are, and that we wind up being the Josephs, that one minute we're forgiving and the next minute we're vindictive, that we think we're engaged in these wonderful callings and vocations that are saving people and helping people, and my students that I've formed and my patients that I've healed, and we're also probably inadvertently implicated in supercharging empire, right? Those of us who have been associated with Duke University know a thing or two about doing good work in the service of empire. And yet, even in that, God is with us. God is at work because we follow a Lord who, though crucified, was resurrected. And I think that is the best I can make of Genesis 45, at least on 2 days' notice. Amen.